Night is about liturgy. And the word liturgy comes from two Greek words referring to the work of the people. The word for people and the word for work get wedded together. So the liturgy is the great work of God's people, and giving worship and praise and thanks to God. The subtitle is going to be Making Time Holy. So we as Catholics don't just see time as another thing to get through, but we make time sacred by setting apart times that make time unique. So let me add, first on a daily basis. St. Paul says pray always. And when St. Paul talks about praying always in the early church, early Christians took that very seriously. How do we pray throughout the day? And so if you ever go to a monastery with a retreat going on this weekend at St. Meinrad, they literally set aside times throughout the day to sanctify the day. So the morning prayer, evening prayer, which are kind of the hinge periods of prayer during the day. Morning prayer being the time when you wake to give praise and thanks to God. Evening prayer being the time about now when it gets dark outside and begin to light the lamps. So those were kind of the hinge points of prayers in the early Christian church. And they also set aside midday as a time for prayer before the midday meal. Mid-morning about 9 o'clock. Mid-afternoon around 3 o'clock. And then a prayer before you would go to bed at night prayer. So if you go to a monastery, you get to experience all those different hours of prayer. And I suppose for us, the question might be, how do we make the day a day that is holy, that reflects our own awareness that we need to be conscious of God throughout the day? So minimally, I always say you should begin your morning with a morning offering. So starting your day with prayer. Thank you, God, for this new day. I want to do everything today for your glory and honor. That's a very simple, short morning prayer. Before you go to sleep at night, thank you, God, for the blessings of the day. You might do a quick review, an examination of your conscience. You know, God, where did I get off track today? Do I need to make any amends tomorrow? What do I need to ask God's help for on the following day? So you might call to mind those moments. And also, very importantly, you call to mind moments during the day when you became aware of God's grace or presence or love, and you cooperated. So the end of the day shouldn't be only reviewing where you got off track, but it should be especially moments where you are conscious of the presence of God and you responded to that presence. So those are kind of, I think, good hinge points. Other very helpful times to pray are before meals. A lot of people do that before their meals. They say grace. And so learning what works for you. How do you set time aside during your day? And if you've been paying attention over the last several weeks at St. Henry, we've been doing this big thing called the St. Henry Prayer Challenge. We're really inviting everybody to consider trying to take at least, let's say, 20 minutes a day just to be with God. So you can do that in a lot of ways. Some people pray the rosary when they're driving in the car. Some people walk outside. Some people have a place of prayer. I've got my mug of coffee and I've got my place in the warm weather that I sit to start my day in prayer. And in the cool weather, I've got my indoor place. I light my candle. I turn on my electric fireplace. And I turn my phone into airplane mode. And I start my day with God. And really, honestly, it's probably one of the most foundational parts of my day. It sets the tone for every other part of the day. So learning how to make our days sanctified and holy, that's important. So I encourage y'all to think about that now. You know, do you take time already? Someone said if you're not doing it daily, taking quiet time to be alone with God, then start with a short window of time and just be faithful every single day. Start with 5 minutes. You know, if you got 10 or 15 minutes to give God, that's even better. You can start with 20 to 30 minutes a day. You know, that's a great way to start your day with God. And I know some people have been praying for years that certainly they might take their hour with God in the morning. So, I always say we take time to get ready for every other part of our morning. We take our shower, we get dressed, we do what needs to be done. So isn't it more important that I get ready on the inside? So for me, my time with the Lord during the morning is very important. Now, beyond that, one day at a time, and I think one day at a time is so important, and even Jesus says that. We pray, give us this day our daily bread. And he says, don't worry about tomorrow. We don't know when tomorrow's going to bring, but today's worries are sufficient for today. So learning to live life one day at a time is really important. But beyond that, the church organizes time, as our ancient Jewish ancestors did, around a week. The rest of the ancient world worked all the time. In the Roman Empire, they worked all the time. But our Jewish ancestors were given a commandment. The seventh day is holy to the Lord your God. You shall keep the Sabbath holy, for even on the seventh day God rested. And you know what our Jewish ancestors gave the world? They gave the world the realization God did not create us to work constantly, that we need rest as human beings. And we need a special day of the week that's set aside for the renewal of our inner being and to give praise and thanks to our Creator. So for our Jewish ancestors, the Sabbath was the seventh, the final day of the week, Saturday, the day that God rested. In early Christianity, the observance of a special day of the week quickly got transferred to the first day of the week, to Sunday, the day of the Lord. Anybody know why for Christians that became the day above all other days? It's the original holy day.
The resurrection occurred on Sunday.
The resurrection. It's the day Jesus rose from the dead. So the Lord's Day, the day of the Lord, Sunday, became, for Christians, the day of the week that made every other day what it was supposed to be. And remember, for the first 300 years in Christianity, in the Roman Empire, Sunday was a day of work in the Roman Empire. So Christians had to gather for what we call today the Eucharist, either before work or after work in the evening. But they still marked that day as separate because it was the day on which Jesus rose from the dead. And they also recalled the fact that God had created the world on the first day of the week. So when I was a young person, and some of the folks who've been around a while probably remember this, especially in the southern United States, Sundays were different than any other day of the week. And I'll tell you, I grew up in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, about 80 miles south of here. There's about 10,000 people there. What was open on Sunday when I was a kid? You were shaking your head. Nothing. So churches were open. People went to church. But you couldn't find a drugstore, grocery store, or a gas station that was open in Lawrenceburg on Sundays when I was a little kid. So that meant, by the way, that with everything closed, the only thing that you could do was mark the day as something different than the rest of the week. And so we would go to church in the morning, and almost every evening we would go to my grandmother's house for Sunday evening dinner, and it was either very dry chicken or very dry roast. Those were the two dinners of choice. She was Italian, so she made the best Italian food on the planet, but she wasn't very good at roasting. But we always watched The Wonderful World of Disney and The Wild Kingdom on TV, and we would have dinner together as a family. And what else did we do on Sundays? Well, we'd play outside, or we would get in the car, we would drive, we would go, let's go for a drive, Mom or Dad would say. And in those days, it was perfectly fine to drop in on your relatives. So we'd stop at my aunt and uncle's houses and just say, hey, what y'all doing? And we'd just hang out for the afternoon with them. So the thing that was good about that was that it meant that Sundays really were different than the rest of the week. You didn't do your chores. We didn't do laundry that day. We were typically not doing lawn care, that kind of stuff. No bill paying. It really was a day set apart that made the rest of the week what it was meant to be. So for us Catholics, we keep that day sacred by by going to the Sunday Eucharist or to the vigil the evening before on Saturday evening. Why does that work for us? Because for our Jewish ancestors, a new day began at sunset. And so at the shortest day of the year in Tennessee, for example, the sun sets about 4:30, which means if you start your evening liturgy as early as 4, you still get part of it in the dark. So it technically qualifies for your Sunday Mass obligation. So you can go to Mass anytime from that vigil service all the way through Sunday up to midnight, actually. So we're very generous in giving you lots of parameters. But that's kind of the core commitment, that Catholics make, that we're going to honor the day of the Lord by being at Sunday Eucharist, unless some grave reason keeps us away, illness or inability to get there because of travel or whatever it may be. So my challenge to the rest of you is to think about, too, for yourself and for your family, how will you make that day different than all your other days of the week in a way that gives honor and glory to God and helps you as a person and your family be recreated. So I was on an airplane one time flying out for a retreat in Colorado, and I picked up the airplane magazine, and there was a story, a front page story, on modern Jewish family rediscovers the value of the Sabbath. And they had decided as a family, they were Jewish, so they took Saturday off, and they decided that from Friday evening at sundown until Saturday evening at sundown, nobody in the family was permitted to do anything that was considered work or arduous. So if they didn't like doing laundry, they didn't do laundry, didn't pay bills, didn't go shopping. So they said, on this day, we'll set it apart to do only activities that truly recreate us. They would go to the movies, or go to an art museum, or go to the park. They would prepare all their meals ahead of time so they didn't have to do strenuous meal preparation. And they said it changed their life, it changed the rest of the week. So that's why I mentioned for yourself, think about what could you do. I have a hunch that if you celebrated well the day of the Lord and made it different, it would make the rest of your week more manageable. So once I read that article, by the way, I realized that I needed to revise how I was living my life. Up to that point, I was doing what they had done before, which was on my so-called day off, I caught up on everything I couldn't get done during the week. I'd be, washing clothes and cleaning the house and paying bills and doing all the stuff that needed to be done. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, wait a minute. I thought, what if I really did on that day only truly recreative things? Meals with friends, walk in the park, go see a movie, what would happen? So just like I started my day with prayer, I noticed when I started my day with prayer and had that day of the week that was for the Lord, wonderful things began to happen. So that's part of how we make time sacred as Catholics. Now, I want to also mention for us Catholics, and this is one of my favorite things about being Catholic, is that we have this very beautiful awareness of reflecting on the mystery of the person of Jesus Christ throughout the year. So we call it the liturgical year. And I want to talk about the two great cycles for a moment. So the most important day of the week is Sunday, Day of Resurrection. It's a mini Easter 52 times a year. The most important part of the entire calendar year, liturgical year, is what we call, and it's in the middle of the board I have behind me, the Triduum, the great 3 days. So you may notice I put right in the middle of the 3 great days, Triduum in Latin, and I've marked it into 3 separate days. HT, Holy Thursday, GF, Good Friday, EV, Easter Vigil. So those Holy Saturday, those 3 great days, from the beginning of the Lord's Supper on the evening of Holy Thursday, all the way through the morning of Easter Sunday morning, when you celebrate what Jesus did, gave us in the Eucharist at the Last Supper, his death on the cross on Good Friday, all the way through the great vigil of Easter, which is the mother of all celebrations throughout the year. If there's one Catholic liturgy in the year that is preeminent above all the others, it's the great vigil of Easter. It's also the longest liturgy of the year. So you have the great liturgy of fire at the beginning, and we light candles. We have a great liturgy of word that goes through the great stories of salvation in the Old Testament all the way through the resurrection. You have a liturgy of baptism where you baptize those people who are becoming baptized at Easter. That will be some of you, right? And you also confirm those who are newly baptized or who are becoming Catholic. And we also give First Holy Communion to those who are entering the church. So that great night of the Easter Vigil is an extraordinarily beautiful liturgy. It's the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And the day before Good Friday, marking the death of the Lord, and the evening before Holy Thursday, those three great days are the center and heart of our liturgical year. Their Sunday exploded out into 3 days. And then we Catholics, we love focusing on the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. So we have something called the octave of Easter. So we say Easter is not just one 24-hour day, but it's Easter Sunday and the 7 days that follow it. So 8 full days to celebrate the great day of Easter, all the way to what we call the octave, or the 8th day of Easter, also called the Sunday of Divine Mercy, because of the great mercy that the risen Lord showed us when he rose from the dead. So those 8 days they flow out of the Triduum. We also prepare for those 3 great days with Holy Week, the days before that begin the Sunday before with Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday, when we focus on the Passion of the Lord either from Matthew, Mark, or Luke. And those days of Holy Week are getting us ready for that great Triduum. Now we Catholics, that's the center of the liturgical year, but even the 8 days of the day of Easter are not enough. So we actually have a 50-day season of Easter. It goes all the way to Pentecost Sunday, 50 days after Easter Sunday. And on the 40th day, tradition marks the ascension of Jesus into heaven. And because we Catholics don't want to jump right back into Green Sundays, we have added on the end of Easter Sundays to honor the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit, and the gift of the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ. So otherwise, most of the Sundays of the year are what we call Sundays of the year, or Sundays of ordinary time. So you'll see green vestments during ordinary time. During Easter, for the most part, you see white or gold. On Pentecost, which is a Holy Spirit-focused feast, when the Holy Spirit descended and the church was born, on Holy Spirit feasts and feasts regarding the death of the Lord, or martyrs who died for him, you see red vestments. So that's a big year, big time of the year. We also want to be well prepared for Holy Week and our Great Triduum, so we actually have 40 full days before Easter, 40 plus odd, the great 40 days of Lent, from Ash Wednesday all the way to Holy Thursday, that prepare us for that great Paschal Triduum. And so during those 40 days of Lent, we wear purple vestments. It's a time when we intensify our prayer, we fast. We Catholics have chosen not to eat meat on the Fridays of Lent and to fast, to eat less food on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And all Catholics are encouraged to find other ways to sacrifice and to deny oneself during those 40 days. And in the common Catholic culture, you'll often hear Catholics say around Ash Wednesday before or after, what are you giving up for Lent? Or what did you give up for Lent? So why do we give up things that we enjoy? I think it creates a space for God. So when I really enjoy my dark chocolate, and I don't eat it during the 40 days of Lent, every time I want to grab a dark chocolate bar, I'm like, I'm really hungry for something more than chocolate in life. And it reminds me of how hungry for God. Or I might give up something more important to me than that. When I was a teenager one time, and I was addicted to TV in those days, I gave up TV for the 40 days of Lent, except on Sundays. So you'll hear this debate in Catholicism about, do you give it up every day of Lent, including the Sundays of Lent or not? And it's entirely up to the individual. So some Catholics do not give up things on Sundays because there's still days of resurrection even during Lent. And others are kind of, I think they're a little more purist. They're like, well, if I'm giving up chocolate, I want to do it even on those Sundays of Lent. So I'm not going to do it at any point, even on Sundays. So You can do whatever you want. And in fact, your penances are tailor-made. So, some people say, well, I'm going to give up, alcohol during the week, and I'm going to give up meat on the weekends. So you can, something that represents for you a personal sacrifice or letting go, fasting. But also the church is saying, you want to deepen your life of prayer. So if I regularly pray 15 minutes a day, God, I'm going to give you 30 during Lent each day. Or I'll go to Mass every day. Or I'll pray the Rosary every day. So something that I do that's a bit extraordinary during Lent. And also, very importantly, we speak about almsgiving. So if our Christian piety does not lead to love for others, outward love, acts of service and kindness and charity, then we have missed the whole point. So we're to become more like Christ, who loved to the very end. So prayer and fasting and almsgiving, which is all the good that we do, go together. So when we were kids, we could say, well, I'm giving up Snicker bars for Lent. And Mom might say, well, what are you going to do? Good. Who's going to do an extra task around the house? So, we would have some active service, to think about. So those are these all good. So the purpose of which, those 40 days, is to spiritually prepare us for the great Paschal Triduum, so that we can celebrate it with greater joy than ever and the joy of Easter to go for 50 days. I also think, by the way, for some reason we Catholics, I guess we like mortification or something. We tend to get more excited about Lent sometimes than we do about Easter. So I always challenge Catholics to think about how we will celebrate the resurrection of Jesus for those great 50 days. What will be added signs of our new life in Christ during this 50 days, instead of just focusing on how we trim ourselves back during Lent, so to speak. So that's my kind of personal challenge to think about. So yes, we begin Lent with Ash Wednesday, and that is a beautiful day of prayer. So most Catholics go to Mass, even though it's one of those few days that's not required that Catholics love to go. So you get people who show up on Ash Wednesday that haven't been there for weeks or months, and their foreheads are marked with the sign of the cross and ashes, and they hear the words, either remember you are dust, and to dust you will return, or turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. So powerful words to start a season of the year, don't you think? And to walk with that symbol of ashes in the form of a cross on your forehead. So this great Paschal cycle that surrounds the Triduum, starting on Ash Wednesday, ending on Pentecost Sunday, 50 days after Easter, that is sort of the center and heart of our liturgical year. Now there is a second cycle that is connected to that, but it's not as much of a heart, but for many Catholics it's also as beloved, if not more beloved, than Easter. And that's everything that surrounds Christ becoming incarnate, becoming human, and being born in our world. So we call the great feast of Christmas. And by the way, I'll just mention as a quick aside, how did we get Christmas in December? Well, in the Roman Empire, when the days got shorter and shorter and shorter, all the way to the shortest day of the year on the 21st, after a few days, and they saw that darkness was not going to swallow them alive, but that the days were gradually getting longer again, they would have this feast what they called the Sol Invictus, the invincible sun. And by that they meant the physical sun, because they could see the sun was regaining its strength. And so Pope St. Leo the Great said, you Christians come to Mass on Christmas, and you bow to the sun before you come in the door. So give up your pagan customs and come on in and celebrate the birth of the true Son of God, which is Jesus, who became born for us. So we put the feast to mark and celebrate the incarnation and birth of Jesus right at midwinter to say this is what we really should be celebrating, the true light of the world who came to enlighten every human person. So the great feast of Christmas, Catholics also love, and one of the traditions that began about 800 years ago with St. Francis of Assisi was celebrating a Christmas Mass in the middle of the night. And it was Francis who said, let's recreate the Christmas scene. So he created the first live nativity scene. So he brought in an ox and an ass, and had sheep and shepherds, and they went up this hillside, and they had a midnight mass by torchlight up on a mountainside, and recreated the story of Christmas as read in the Gospel of Luke. And they said that night when that mass ended, and the villagers went back to their villages, and the torchlights were spreading across the darkened mountain as they went back home, it was like the light of Christ spreading across the world, as if Christ had been born again. And once St. Francis of Assisi did that, Christians fell in love with midnight masses, and we fell in love with creche scenes, or mangers. So now you find them living manger scenes done by many people throughout the world, and also in many Christian, and not even just Catholic these days, many Christian homes you find a miniature nativity scene preparing you for Christmas. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've got a beautiful little nativity, and I put it up, and I don't put the baby Jesus in until Christmas Eve, after we celebrate the first Mass of Christmas. So we're waiting until that point where we have to fill the space. But then I put the baby Jesus out in the nativity scene, and I love to light a little light above it and have all the room dark, and I walk in at night, and I imagine myself there at that first Christmas. So that's the idea behind it. And so we prepare for Christmas with about 4 weeks of preparation called Advent. But Advent is also a time, really, when we are readying ourselves to meet Jesus when he comes at the end of time. That's kind of the most ancient meaning of Advent. So we want to meet the Lord face to face and be ready. So Advent is a time, and in fact the first couple of Sundays of Advent, there's nothing about the baby Jesus. It's all about the day of the Lord, when the Lord will return at the end of time, and get ready for it. So it's getting us ready to meet the Lord. And some Christian spirituality, good spirituality through the centuries, has noted we're preparing for Christ to come at the end of our life on earth when we die, or at the end of time. We're also preparing for the birth of Jesus. But we should also be awake to the different ways that Christ comes to us each and every day. So we start looking for the face of Jesus in the world around us. And how might we see Jesus? Day by day. Well, one way is other human persons. And especially those who need us the most. Remember, Jesus himself said, whatever you do for the least of my brothers and sisters, you do for me. So when we feed the hungry, he says, you're actually feeding me. When you welcome the stranger, you welcome to me. When you went to the hospital or to the prison, it was me that you visited. When you clothed the naked, you were clothing me. So that's one of the beautiful ways that the Lord comes to us, when we're meeting our neighbor in the great Advent journey, getting ready for Christmas. And just like with Easter, we Catholics, and we have to fight against the cultural stream, because now what's happened in our culture is shopping malls put up Christmas trees on Halloween and start playing Christmas music on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So it's like we exhaust ourselves on all the Christmas things, and by the time Christmas gets here, we're all done with it. I remember one time I was driving around downtown Nashville, this is several years ago, and it was about 3 or 4 days before Christmas. I was listening to the radio, and they were about to play a Christmas carol on the radio, and the guy says, well, let's play a Christmas song, it's almost over, Christmas is almost over, so let's go ahead and get it in now. And I thought, almost over, we haven't even gotten there yet, So if you can keep Advent really well, and wait and really celebrate Christmas on Christmas, we Catholics do it for an extended period of time. So we have what's called the octave of Christmas. So you can't confine Christmas to one day either. So we have 8 days that make up the great day of Christmas. And we actually extend it all the way traditionally to January the 6th, to the Feast of the Epiphany, when the Magi visited the Lord. And for Italian Catholics who remember their Italian roots well, and for Eastern Christians, the Epiphany was often more important than Christmas Day itself. It was the day when Christ revealed himself to all the nations. And technically, liturgically, we carry the Christmas season now all the way to the Sunday after the Epiphany, which is normally the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. So that is a much shorter period of time than the Easter season, but it means that we Catholics can enjoy pondering the birth of Jesus long after the secular culture is now putting up Valentine's Day decorations. So I always say this is my challenge to Catholics to think about. How can you wait to make your house really feel like Christmas a little closer to the actual celebration of Christmas? Now, mind you, my sister already has her Christmas tree up, I'm sure. So I tease her about that every year. And, but you know, when people used to get living Christmas trees all the time, you really couldn't put them up too early, or they got dried out, and then you have to get rid of them right on Christmas Day. So how can you save something for Christmas? You know, in the olden days, long before my time, they would actually put the Christmas tree up on Christmas Eve. And then the children will wake up in the morning and find the Christmas tree up in the morning. So no Christmas appeared before Christmas Eve. And so if you can keep your Christmas decorations up through January the 6th, the great feast of the Epiphany, that is the ideal. So how do we get beyond the American approach to anticipating everything, once it gets there, you're done with it, to preparing for something and then really enjoying it and relishing it, letting it soak in after you have some time to think about it. So that's another one of my challenges for making time sacred. But even I, fall into it, because by about January the 1st, I'm getting a little like, oh, there's a lot of Christmas stuff around, what is it going to? Not in the church so much as in the house, but the church will keep the decorations in the whole season. All right, so that's a bit about how we make time sacred. It's interesting because what you're really doing in the liturgical year is you are really circling around the mystery of Jesus Christ year by year. And in a sense, it's a sort of a spiral. As you circle around the mystery of Jesus, you should be trying to go deeper and deeper into that mystery. So we ponder the mystery of the person of Jesus and his incarnation, death, and resurrection, so that we can become more like him and be drawn into his life forever. And the rest of the year, the green Sundays are ordinary time of growth in Christian living. There are special feast days that get sprinkled throughout the year, saints' days. We end the liturgical year with the great feast of Christ the King, which is this coming Sunday. So just as we begin it on the first Sunday of Advent, we end it on the Sunday. So what I could say to you, a week from Sunday on the first Sunday is Advent, I could say to all of you, Happy New Year! And then the rest of the world would think I am crazy, right? So, because we wait until January 1st. But we start a new liturgical year on the first Sunday of Advent, and we end up the last great Sunday of the liturgical year is the great feast of Christ the King. So that's a little overview about how we Catholics make time sacred. And you may notice in the Northern Hemisphere how well the natural world, so the liturgical cycle was designed around the Northern Hemisphere, the way we experience climate. So when everything is dark and short, in the winter and cold, we focus on Christ, the light of the world, being born into our world. As spring unfolds, we're getting ready to celebrate the mystery of the resurrection and the great Triduum, and we get to see the explosion of spring after Easter. So the rhythm of the Northern Hemisphere works beautifully for our liturgical year because it was designed in the Northern Hemisphere. Those who are in Australia and New Zealand, not so much. So they just have to experience eating Christmas on a hot summer day. And sometimes they would do that actually, cook the same meal that they did in England, in Australia or New Zealand. So, any questions or observations about making time sacred on the liturgical year? So how did Christ reveal himself to the nations? The first Epiphany, the manifestation of Christ to the nations, was when the Magi show up to adore him. Because they're not people of Israel, they're outsiders who come from the east, from the Orient, from another nation to adore Christ. So that's considered the first revelation of Christ to the nations or the Gentiles. The second one is often spoken of as his baptism at the Jordan River, even though technically there are not nations there, it's a manifestation. The third is often spoken of, the third Epiphany, as the wedding feast of Cana, where water becomes wine, his first sign. So those are the three great epiphanies that mark the beginnings of his ministry. How is he really revealed to the nations? You might say through his cross and resurrection, and especially the descent of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. Or is it a mortal sin not to keep the Sabbath holy? So from a Catholic point of view, the grave obligation for us is about being present at the Sunday Eucharist. So we're obliged to be at Sunday Mass, including, that would include the Saturday evening vigil, unless there is some serious or grave reason. So not to do so would be considered a grave sin, or something we would never choose to do freely. We have to remind Catholics of that because sometimes they need to remember how important that is. Right.
If you do commit a mortal sin, is it like you're not passing away, you got kind of deal, or is it purgatory there?
All right, so there's a difference between what we call venial sin and mortal sin. Venial is the Latin word for light. So it's like in a marriage, like when you're unkind to your spouse, you put friction in the relationship, it's not good for it. If you, let's say, commit adultery, then that's great. You know, you've violated your promise you made your wife. If you don't repent, then you're going to be in the doghouse. So mortal sin comes from the Latin word mortis, or deadly, and a mortal sin is something that is gravely morally wrong, seriously wrong, that I know is seriously wrong, and I freely choose to do it. So if it's not gravely wrong to begin with, it won't be a grave sin. If it's not freely chosen, if my freedom is limited by interior force or fear or external coercion, then that mitigates the graveness of it. Or if I'm not aware that what I'm doing is gravely wrong. So all those things, but if I fulfilled all those requirements and I'm gravely turned, and I never repent, if I persist in separating myself and saying no to repentance forever, then God will respect that, and I would end up in eternal punishment that we call hell. Now, the moment I repent, and I'm genuinely sorry for the love of God, already the grace of God has begun to heal that sin in me. And thankfully, we as Catholics also have a sacrament of reconciliation through which I can go and be restored through that sacrament if I have gravely fallen. And it's also a great place to mention my venial sins and grow in holiness. So the only sin that God will not forgive is when we gravely have sinned and we remain in final impenitence, we call it. Refusing, resisting forever. Because God is an infinite respecter of our human freedom and will not force us to be with Him for all eternity if that is not our choice.
It's not just having rules, it's also saying I'm not perfect.
Correct. Final impenitence. And it's interesting, we Catholics, I'll give you a little technical stuff. Let's say I commit a gravely morally wrong sin. I murder somebody. Well, let's say I'm not really sorry for the love of God, but I don't want to burn in hell for all eternity. I can go to confession and celebrate sacrament of reconciliation, and God will forgive me. However, if I'm truly sorry for what I've done out of love for God, that in itself already brings forgiveness. So that's what we call perfect contrition, for love of God rather than imperfect for only fear of punishment. So the reason I mention all these things, by the way, is Catholics come in two extremes, probably. We have some who are what I call excessively worried all the time that they may have been doing something gravely wrong and fearful that God is going to get them if they don't dot all the I's, probably cross all the T's correctly. And I think you want to free those people up to remember God is trying to help us, not exclude us. On the other end of the extreme are those who care little about that which is morally good and right and true and move from one evil to another. Most of those people are not too excited about being actively engaged in the life of faith. But, it's not to say that in the end, I can't make a gravely bad decision, So that's why we pray for the grace to persevere in the life of grace that Christ has won for us on the cross, all the way to the end, and trust in God's care to help get us there. That's what we call the Christian virtue of hope, midway between despair and presumption. Hope. It's the virtue midway between despair and presumption. Most virtues are a balance in between things, between extremes.
How do you pronounce that word?
Triduum?
Triduum. Is it T-R-I-D-U-U-M?
It is. Triduum is the Latin for 3 days. The great 3 days. Tri is 3, duum, days. The great 3 days. All right. Any other questions? Good questions tonight. All across the board, yes.
About the Lent season, you know, not eating on Fridays, or is that the fasting, you said on Wednesdays and Fridays?
On Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And those are mandatory fast days for all Catholics who are less than 59 and a half years old. So and we Catholics are very easy on fasting. In other words, you don't eat between meals and you can have 1 full meal and 2 small meals that don't add up to as much as that full meal you have. So for us, that's a day of fast. And that doesn't sound like doing much, but if you're used to eating a regular amount of food and you do that, I notice it if I fast in that way. And I also notice when I'm not eating meat on Fridays of Lent. It's like many days I don't eat meat without thinking about it, but on Fridays of Lent for some reason, I want a cheeseburger. I want a bacon. So it's the sacrifice that makes me tune in,
So not eating meat on Fridays only during Lent?
Or not eating meat on Fridays is required only during Lent for Catholics.
Okay.
It is basically something one does throughout the year or another penance on other Fridays, but it's required on Fridays of Lent. You can't normally substitute another penance for it, whereas other Fridays of the year you can substitute any for the sacrificial. And the reason we chose Friday to be a bit more sacrificial is the day Jesus died for us. So we try to be more sacrificial on that day.
Why does fish not count?
That's a curious historical question that I need to do more research about. But I think part of the reason may have been that meat was considered a greater luxury in the medieval period when these kinds of things developed. And fish was considered the food of the poor. So you didn't deprive the poor of their protein for the day, but those who had means had to give up the meat. So the question might be today, some people might prefer lobster, and that might not be in the spirit of Friday. And I have to personally admit, I do eat sometimes good fish on Fridays of Lent, but every time I do, I would prefer to have meat. So for me, it's always like, I would rather have a steak tonight. So, but for other people, that might not be so,
You said on Ash Wednesday,
Ash Wednesday, no meat, and also fast.
that you give 2 blessings, or you give 1 blessing.
Oh, the
One
lighting
is
of
the-
ashes,
is
right.
The ash.
On the sign of the cross.
And another
Correct.
one. My question is, why is it either or?
The liturgical rites of the Catholic Church offer you options a lot of times, and it just gives you the choice. You can either say, repent and believe the good news, or you can say, remember your dust, and unto dust you shall return.
And that's really something that you would determine.
Every priest determines that, yeah,
Okay.
at his masses. Yeah. Yeah, do you leave your ashes on your forehead all day long? I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. It's just, yeah, you're not, as long as you're not doing it to show off, I think it's okay. Yeah, one time I was teaching at Father Ryan High School, I was the associate principal. and the chaplain. The cafeteria people weren't Catholic. They ran the food service. And the wrestlers had shaved their heads for the wrestling season. And they came in with those black marks on their foreheads. And the kitchen people wouldn't serve them because they thought they were in a cult or something. So I had to go back to the dining hall people and I said, no, I said, don't worry about them. They're the ones that mask. Worry about the ones that don't have the ashes on their heads. So,
What's the ash made from?
the ashes, yeah, great question, are made from the palm branches that were used the previous Palm Sunday.
Yes.
So we recollect those blessed palm branches and we burn them. And we create the ashes from those palm branches. So it shows the link between what Jesus did for us on the Passion and his Passion with what we're marking our foreheads with, the sign of the cross. So probably the richer theological meaning of the ashes is repent and believe the good news. That's kind of a real call of Lent. But the more traditional language was remember your dust, and your dust you shall return. So most Catholics kind of like that one better, I think. That's my impression.
Do you have to be a confirmed Catholic to receive the ashes on Ash Wednesday?
No, anybody can be ash. Yes. Who wants to be? Yes. It's a sacramental sign. If you're open to being ashed, you can be ashed. Yeah. Although I shouldn't say this, but there was a priest once, also when I was a Father Ryan, who got tongue-tied when he tried to bless the ashes and didn't say ashes. So, stuff happens, right? So, all right, I think it's time for those of you who are journeying, you can go to the tables and discuss. And all the sponsors are going to come with me to the baptismal font to walk through a ritual for the first Sunday of Advent. So